Hello, I'm Lenora. My family planned a dream vacation, without me. No call, no message, just silence. I wasn't even worth a courtesy lie. But the twist? They unknowingly booked that vacation at my private resort. The same people who erased me from photos, used my name, even my money, now stood at my front desk. Want to know how it got that far? How it broke? And how I rebuilt? You might see pieces of your own story in mine. The email came through at 7:41 a.m., just as the sun was starting to warm the side of my apartment building in Santa Fe. I hadn't taken a sip of my coffee yet. It had already cooled, and my inbox blinked with the subject line in bold. Family Retreat 2025, let's go. For a second, I just stared at it. My thumb hovered above the mouse pad as if clicking it would trigger something irreversible. I clicked anyway. Everyone was there. I mean everyone. My brothers, their wives, my cousins, my aunts. Even Dad's second cousin Paul, who lives in Maine and still types in all caps. They were all CC'd, but not me, not even BCC'd. I checked the header twice, then a third time. No hidden fields, no technical oversight. Just a list, perfectly curated without me. I kept reading, foolishly hoping I'd missed something. Maybe a follow-up email, maybe a separate thread. But nothing came. And deep down I already knew. This wasn't a mistake. It never had been. They didn't forget me. They removed me. At 8:09 I called my mother. I didn't think it through. My body just moved on muscle memory, like a reflex from childhood, skinning your knee and calling out to the person who might clean the wound, even if you know they're the one who pushed you. "Lenora!" she chirped, way too brightly for a woman who hadn't included her own daughter in the family's annual getaway. "What a surprise!" "Hey," I said. "Got a minute?" I could hear the pause in her throat, the fake smile slipping. She knew why I was calling. "Is everything okay?" I saw the email. "Oh," she breathed. Just that. Not even a, "What email?" She already knew which one. I waited. She filled the silence like she always did, with pleasantries soaked in condescension. "Sweetheart, we figured you'd be busy again. You always have those projects going. And with your firm taking off, well, we just didn't want to bother you." I wasn't even asked. "Well," she said slowly, "these trips get so chaotic. You know how it is. We didn't want you to feel pressured." I didn't respond. What was the point? This wasn't a conversation, it was a performance. She was just reciting her lines like she had rehearsed them for weeks. "You're always working, Lenora. We just assumed—" "Right," I cut in. "You assumed?" She paused again, then tried softening her tone. "We didn't mean anything by it. You know we love you, baby." "No, you love the version of me that doesn't take up space." I hung up without another word. I didn't slam the phone down. I didn't have that luxury anymore, just the dull tap of an end call on glass. The silence in my apartment was louder than her excuses. I poured myself a glass of wine. It was 11:02 in the morning. I didn't care. I only ever drank this early when someone I loved died, or when I had to accept they were never going to be who I needed them to be. I stared out the window while the wine coated my throat like a slow burn. They hadn't forgotten. They had planned around me. I wasn't an afterthought. I was an intentional omission. The phone buzzed again. It was Savina. "Savina. Saw the thread. You okay?" I stared at the screen a moment before answering. "Me. Yeah, I'm just done pretending this doesn't sting." Savina didn't reply right away, which I appreciated. She knew the weight of silence better than most. Knew it wasn't always empty. Sometimes it held more truth than any well-meaning platitude. That afternoon I tried to work. Tried to sketch something for the Anderson estate remodel. But everything I drew came out harsh. Too many sharp corners. Too many sterile lines. No warmth, no light. Just glass and steel and silence. Just like home. I closed the sketchbook and walked over to my bookshelf. A dusty shell sat tucked between two trade journals I hadn't opened since 2019. Turquoise, iridescent. My mother bought it for me when I was 8. Said it looked like it held secrets. Something for my little dreamer, she had called me. Back when I was still her dream. Before I became her excuse. Before she started telling people, Lenora's always doing her own thing. Like independence was a flaw. That night, I curled up on the sofa with a blanket that still smelled faintly of sage from last winter, and did something I hadn't done in a long time. I opened last year's vacation album. Not mine, of course. The one Savina had quietly screen captured from the family group thread. There they were, posing in front of a resort gate in Scottsdale. Everyone sun-kissed and grinning. One photo caught me mid-laugh, but I wasn't laughing anymore in the version posted online. My body had been cropped. Just a breeze of my hair remained in the frame, like a ghost that had wandered too close to the living. I sat there for what felt like an hour, the light from my laptop washing over the room in a soft, cold glow. The air had shifted, not in temperature, but in pressure. It was like the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting to see if I'd react. I didn't cry. Instead, I closed the family album tab and opened an old backup folder on my drive, one I hadn't touched in almost a year, a habit from when I used to document everything, events, designs, trips, just in case someone tried to say I'd imagined it all. And there it was, the original photo, me, center frame, standing beside that ridiculous lemon cake Mom insisted on ordering from the resort bakery. I was laughing, one arm still holding a pitcher of lemonade. Maribel had been to my right, Uncle Jerome on the other. I zoomed in, my face alive, candid, unfiltered, and then I clicked back to the version from the group thread. Gone. My entire face was gone. They hadn't just trimmed the edges or applied a flattering blur, they had surgically cropped me out, like I'd been a stranger who photobombed a stranger's memory. The caption on the post was even worse. Family forever. The irony of that line burned like acid behind my eyes. I blinked fast, not because I was crying, but because my body was resisting the urge to smash something. That photo wasn't just edited, it was curated. A timeline scrubbed of the daughter who'd made the centerpieces, coordinated the outfits, and reminded everyone to arrive by 3 p.m. sharp because the light would be perfect for photos. But sure, family forever. I minimized the window and leaned back, the old office chair creaking beneath me, the kind of noise that filled a room when nothing else did. Somewhere between the thrum of the refrigerator and the faint hum of traffic outside, I found myself thinking about that barbecue. It was 2 summers ago, July, sweltering. My brother Evan had invited the whole family, plus his newest girlfriend, Ashley, Aubrey, something with an A. She had that soft kind of pretty that made people assume she was sweet. She was fixing herself a drink near the cooler when she turned to me with a squint. "Wait," she'd said, blinking like she was doing the math in real time. "Are you, adopted or something?" It wasn't cruel. It wasn't even suspicious. It was just honest. Because she'd been dating my brother for 6 months and had never seen me in a single family post. Not a tag. Not a mention. I remember laughing it off that day, telling her I was the elusive sibling, like some cryptid no one ever caught on camera. But it landed different now. Now it felt like the truth. They hadn't just excluded me from the retreat this year. They had been editing me out for years, on social media, in group stories, even in jokes. I was the footnote in my own family. I opened Instagram. I don't know why. Maybe because I needed to see it with fresh eyes. Maybe because I hoped I was wrong. Maribel's feed was a curated shrine to family bliss, perfect lighting, matching outfits, hashtags like #blessed, #family vibes, #grateful. And there it was, her post about the Scottsdale trip. Her caption read, "Designed by love, lived by family." The photo showed the vacation home I had poured 4 months into renovating. Custom tile work, open shelving with reclaimed wood, a fireplace I fought the contractor to center properly. No credit, no mention, just staged smiles. The comments started to blur together until one caught my eye. "Your sister's design sense is amazing." I held my breath. Maribel replied, "Thank you, it runs in the family." No tag, no name, just silence. But silence says plenty. I knew then that this wasn't about being forgotten. It was about being erased. And not erased because I'd done something wrong. Erased because I no longer fit the picture they wanted to project. Because I challenged it by existing outside their narrative. By being the one who left. The one who made something of herself that didn't revolve around Friday night potlucks and Sunday brunches with the same old gossip recycled like bad leftovers. I wasn't part of the family brand. I was the flaw in the campaign. I stood up, legs a little stiff from sitting too long, walked over to the kitchen and rinsed out my wine glass. I didn't know what time it was. The kind of hour where you could lie and call it early or admit it was late. The room felt too still. I needed noise. I booted up my old desktop, the one I kept around for backups and receipts, both the emotional kind and the literal ones. That's when I remembered it. The forwarded email from last year. I hadn't thought of it since. It had seemed minor then. A copy of the original booking confirmation for the Scottsdale resort, sent accidentally to me instead of Maribel. I remember laughing at the time, forwarded by mistake. Mom said so herself. But something about that moment pulled me back now, with a gravity I couldn't ignore. Maybe it hadn't been a mistake. Maybe someone had wanted me to see it. And if so, why? The next morning arrived slowly. I hadn't slept, not really. My body had gone through the motions, lights off, blanket pulled tight, but my mind never powered down. It was still playing that moment back and forth, like a scratched record. The email receipt. What I once dismissed as a clerical slip was now casting a longer, darker shadow. I didn't bother showering. I shuffled barefoot to the kitchen, still in yesterday's sweatshirt, hair pulled up with a pen. My laptop greeted me with a cold glow as I opened the banking portal I rarely looked at unless tax season rolled around. There it was, a charge from an airline I hadn't flown with in years. It had cleared 2 weeks before last year's vacation. Destination, Phoenix Sky Harbor. Date, 3 days before the family trip began. I blinked, refreshed the page, still there. That card, I hadn't used it since I was 28. The just-in-case card my mother insisted I give her when Dad was in and out of hospitals. "We don't know what emergencies will come up," she'd said back then, her voice low, pleading. I never canceled it. Stupidly sentimental, I guess. Turns out the emergency was a beachside mimosa. Scrolling further, my stomach twisted. Group airfare, hotel deposit, spa service prepayment, all in tidy little transactions, cleanly processed under my name, all lining up with the exact itinerary I now knew like the back of my hand, because I had designed the damn resort they stayed in. They used my money. They cut me out of the photos, out of the emails, but not out of the bill, and not once. This had happened before. Quiet little dings on the same account, always right around family events I'd missed. My fingers hovered above the keys, then moved with surgical calm. I downloaded the statements. Every single one from the past 4 years. I printed them, hole-punched them into a black folder I labeled in Sharpie. Receipts, Vol. I. Scene change happened around noon. The sunlight in my kitchen had shifted, drawing harsh lines across the table. I made a fresh pot of coffee but didn't drink it, just poured and stared. They always told me I was independent, that I didn't need anyone. What they meant was, I was financially useful and emotionally disposable. I remembered a conversation from years ago. Mom had looked at me across Thanksgiving dinner and said, "You're the strong one, sweetie. You always land on your feet." She said it with pride, like it was a badge. But now it echoed like a curse. Strength to them meant availability, for resources, for guilt, for silence. I whispered out loud, maybe just to hear it from someone, even if that someone was me. Let's talk about value. They used me like a bank account with no overdraft limit, and now they'd cashed out for the last time. I reached across the table and opened a sleek navy folder. Ocean Crest Holdings, my personal LLC. Most of my family thought I still worked as a freelance designer. They had no clue I had purchased the coastal property outright through the holding company. It had been my sanctuary, quiet, unbranded, luxurious, no social media, no guests unless invited. The idea struck before I finished the thought. I typed a quick email to the resort manager, then called to follow up. My voice was steady, calm. "Hi, this is Lenora Hart. I believe a reservation was recently made under Suite 2. Possibly using my name?" There was a pause, fingers tapping keys on the other end. "Yes, we have a Suite 2 booked under L. Hart. It was reserved 2 days ago. Is there an issue?" I exhaled through my nose. "No issue. Just wanted to confirm the name. Please flag that reservation for owner review. No changes or access until I say so." "Understood." I ended the call and stared at the screen. Suite 2. Booked in my name. The same name they'd conveniently erased from family events, now suddenly useful again. They weren't just staying at a resort, they were staying at mine. The drive to Ocean Crest took just under 6 hours. I left before dawn, windows down, letting the cool coastal air clear what little sleep clung to me. The silence in the car wasn't empty, it was charged, focused. The kind of silence that fills you before something important happens, like the final breath before jumping. I didn't bother calling ahead again. The flag was already on the reservation, and I knew the front desk wouldn't connect the dots. No one ever did. That was the point of structuring ownership through Ocean Crest Holdings, an anonymous LLC with just enough distance between my name and my assets. Privacy wasn't a luxury anymore. It was armor. When I pulled into the gravel lot just past the main gate, the resort looked exactly how I remembered. Minimal, coastal, effortless, designed to blend with the cliffside instead of competing with it. I'd obsessed over every detail during the remodel 3 years ago. The stone facade, the curved teakwood decking, the solar reflective windows. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, because I needed one place in the world that reflected who I was when no one else was looking. I walked in through the side staff entrance, still remembered the door code, and took the hallway past the laundry area. The smell of linen, detergent, salt air, familiar, comforting. Then I turned the corner into the lobby like any guest would. "Welcome to Ocean Crest," the receptionist smiled brightly from behind the desk. She looked young, mid-20s maybe, new. She'd never seen me before. "Hi," I said calmly, adjusting the collar of my light coat. "I'm here for a scheduled owner's walkthrough." Her expression flickered with confusion. "Oh, 1 second." She clicked a few keys, eyes narrowing at the screen. "Are you Miss Gellhorn?" I blinked. "No, Miss Hart." Another pause, a deeper one this time. Then she scanned the flagged reservation. Her brows lifted slightly, embarrassed. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. Let me just print your visitor credentials." "It's all right," I said, voice even. "No rush." Her cheeks flushed. She tried not to look rattled, but I knew that look. The look people gave when they'd assumed wrong. I'd seen it in business meetings, in contractor bids, even once during a high school reunion when someone asked if I was still into sketching. As she handed over the pass, I leaned slightly over the desk and asked, "Has the Gellhorn party checked in yet?" "No, not yet," she replied. "They're scheduled to arrive tomorrow afternoon. We've prepared 3 suites per their request. Is there something we should be aware of?" "No," I said again. "You've already done exactly what I needed." I made my way down the guest corridor, nodding at a staff member pushing a cart of room service dishware. No one flinched, no one whispered, because no one here knew I had anything to do with this place. I entered the private office suite tucked near the back of the main structure. The space hadn't changed much. Polished concrete floors, white oak cabinetry, high windows facing the ocean. I pulled up the guest reservation file and found it within seconds. Suite 2, under M. Gellhorn. Suite 4, under D. Hartwell. That was my cousin's husband. Suite 5, under F. Navarro, my brother's alias when booking golf retreats. They didn't even try to use fake names. They just didn't expect anyone on the other end to care. I clicked the Settings tab and added one instruction. Upon arrival, place each key card in a sealed envelope. Label only by registered name. No substitutions. Let them open what they booked. Let them use my name and wear it like it was theirs to borrow. The moment they found out I owned the air they were breathing in this place, well, that moment was mine to time. I walked the property before sunset. Every stone, every deck chair, every terrace stair carved into the bluff side was something I'd chosen. They never knew this place existed. Now they'd walk through it thinking they were above it, as they always did. But this time, the story would end differently. Let them arrive. Let them smile. Let them assume. I'd be right here, watching the gate open, one beep away from a lesson they never saw coming. By mid-morning, I was back at Ocean Crest, behind the glass walls of my office. The windows were cracked open just enough to let the salt-heavy wind drift in, laced with eucalyptus and something faintly floral. Maybe the jasmine near the lower path had bloomed early this year. The Pacific moved steadily below, waves folding over themselves like careful breaths. The rhythm was calming, familiar, but my mind wasn't following it. I sat with a half-drunk cup of coffee, long gone cold and bitter, watching the blue line of the horizon. My screen glared from the desk beside me, dashboard already pulled up. Emails sat unread. Messages blinked quietly in the corner, but all my attention was fixed on a single tab. Weekend reservations. It was all there, plain as a spreadsheet. 3 bookings stood out, one for Maribel Gellhorn, another for my parents, and the third, laughably, for L. Hart. Whether the typo was intentional or the result of a careless travel agent, I couldn't say. But the irony wasn't lost on me. My name, butchered and booked into my own resort, as if I were some guest of honor at a stranger's event. I zeroed in on Maribel's suite first. Clicked into the details. Suite 1. Of course. The master. The best. The layout loaded, but I didn't need it. I knew the room better than anyone. I designed it to echo the bedroom from our old family cabin outside Bandon. My childhood sanctuary. The place where I first learned to sketch space, to see possibility in floorboards and beams. That bedroom had been torn down years ago, sold with the land in a fit of adult decisions I hadn't been old enough to contest. But I rebuilt it here. Not out of sentimentality, but as a quiet reclamation. Suite 1 had vaulted ceilings, maple beams, soft light in the mornings, and wide west-facing windows that caught every ounce of sunset. It was a room built from memory and intention, a space I carved from the bones of something lost, and now they wanted to sleep in it, like it was still theirs. My fingers didn't tremble. They moved with steady precision. I clicked Edit. Room assignment. Hold for owner. Do not override. I hit save, then typed a short guest note into the system. Please verify identity before distributing keys. No exceptions. No need for fanfare, no tantrums or threats, just quiet control. I leaned back in my chair and let the soft creak of the leather fill the room. The screen blinked gently, cursor pulsing like a second heartbeat. They would come here expecting champagne flutes and smiles, glossy service and deference. They wouldn't question it. They never had to. That was the problem. Let Maribel strut through the lobby in her newest designer resort wear, sunglasses the size of shields, speaking to the staff like they were born to serve her. Let my parents pretend this trip was their return to grace. Let them all think they were walking into a space that had been waiting for them. I opened the Preferences tab. Firm pillows, cotton sheets, chilled Perrier and fridge, the usual. Then I paused. In the box marked Special Requests, I typed, Add handwritten welcome card. And below that, the message came without effort. Dear guest, welcome to Ocean Crest. Ownership is a quiet kind of power. Please enjoy your stay. I saved it and closed the screen. The card would be printed in clean script on our signature stationery, laid carefully on the bedside table by housekeeping. Subtle. I didn't need a confrontation. I didn't need their guilt, or their confusion, or their excuses. This wasn't revenge. This was precision. This was boundary. Later, I walked the stone path to Suite 1. The air was still, mid-afternoon calm settling over the bluff. Inside, the room was pristine. The bed had been made with sharp corners. The maple headboard gleamed under soft lighting. Throw pillows rested in symmetrical stacks, each angle deliberate. I stood in the doorway and didn't move. The space felt both mine and not mine, like a memory someone had carefully staged for me to revisit. The irony wasn't sharp. It was slow, spreading. They hadn't requested this room because it meant something. They just assumed the best suite was for them, that it always had been, that it always would be. They didn't know who designed the walls they were about to lean against. I crossed the room and stood by the window, looking out. The sea was quiet. The tide had pulled back, leaving streaks of wet sand shining like glass. A breeze stirred the sheer curtains. In my mind, I saw the younger version of me, 9 years old, curled up on a mattress with a sketch pad balanced on my knees, drawing tree houses and secret forts, inventing corners of the world where no one could touch me. Places made from pencil lines and wishful thinking. I hadn't known then that they'd become real. That little girl had built this, not out of revenge, not out of bitterness, but out of vision, out of the stubborn belief that if no one would give me a place to belong, I'd build it with my own hands. Behind me, the room sat in perfect silence, waiting. They didn't know I'd come here. No one had asked. But soon, very soon, they would. By the time the valet texted that a silver Escalade had just pulled into the roundabout, I was already seated in the resort's administrative lounge. The lounge wasn't technically public. It was reserved for senior staff and high-tier partners. But no one questioned me. The room was designed for privacy, shielded by smoked glass and strategically frosted panels, but I had an unobstructed view of the front desk. I hadn't originally planned to watch this unfold in real time. I told myself I was only here to ensure protocol was followed, that guest approval rules were enforced. But that was a lie, or at least not the whole truth. Deep down, I wanted to see it. I needed to see it. A flicker of movement at the entrance caught my eye. There they were. They entered just as I expected them to, confidently, like they owned the place. Maribel came in first, leading the way with her oversized straw tote swinging against her hip like some careless battle standard. Her walk had that exaggerated energy she reserved for places she thought beneath her. Chin up, smile fixed, moving fast so no one had time to question anything. Iris followed close behind, composed as always, except for the telltale adjustment of her sunglasses, a nervous habit. Even though the lobby was dimly lit, she didn't remove them. She just nudged them higher on the bridge of her nose, as if they gave her armor. Their voices carried easily in the open lobby. "We should have asked for early check-in," Maribel said, not bothering to lower her voice. "These coastal resorts always run on island time." The front desk agent, a young woman with polite eyes and a perfectly practiced smile, offered a nod and turned to her computer. "May I have the name on the reservation?" Maribel pivoted slightly, angling toward the desk. "Should be under Iris Gellhorn, or maybe Maribel Gellhorn. We booked a family suite." The agent typed for a few seconds, then hesitated. Her brows drew together subtly. "I'm sorry," she said gently. "I don't see a reservation under either of those names." Maribel blinked, then gave a small, incredulous laugh. No, there has to be. It was confirmed. My mom handled it." She jerked her thumb back toward Iris, who stepped up to the counter. "We have a confirmation number," Iris said calmly. "My daughter managed the booking. It would be under Gellhorn. We reserved the full suite." The agent remained professional. "I understand. Unfortunately, only pre-registered guests approved by the owner are allowed to check in, and I'm not seeing your names listed on that approval." That word, owner, hung in the air for a moment too long. Iris's lips parted. "Owner?" The agent gave a small nod. "This resort is privately held. We're a closed property. All guests must be on the pre-cleared list. I'm afraid I can't authorize access without verification." The shift in atmosphere was immediate. You could almost feel it, like the room was recalibrating its temperature, lowering by degrees. Maribel's voice didn't come. Not right away. She just stared at the receptionist, her jaw tight, fingers wrapping around the edge of her tote strap as if grounding herself. That was my cue. I stood. I stepped out from behind the divider, deliberate in my movement. I didn't rush. My heels didn't make a sound on the polished floor. Not because they were silent, but because the space itself had gone quiet. All eyes turned as I approached the desk. I reached into my coat pocket and handed the receptionist my ID. She glanced at it, and her posture straightened immediately. "Miss Gellhorn," she said with sudden formality, "welcome back." The tension in the lobby didn't snap, it just shifted. Iris's expression twisted into confusion. Maribel turned toward me slowly, recognition dawning in pieces. I offered a smile. Small, measured, cool. Not unfriendly, not warm either. Just precise. "I think there's been a little confusion," I said. "Let me help clarify it." I nodded toward the screen. "Please bring up Suite 2. The agent complied instantly, turning the monitor slightly in my direction. A few names populated the screen. "That's the guest list," I said. "It's under my name. These names here," I tapped the screen lightly, "are the only ones authorized. If someone's name isn't on that list, they won't be staying." I turned to Maribel, then to Iris, holding their gazes. "No offense," I added, voice calm, But next time you might want to check whose name is on the deed before assuming you've got keys to the kingdom." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult. But the message landed cleanly, irrevocably. The resort manager had arrived during the exchange, quietly standing just out of frame. I turned to him without needing to explain much. "Please take any unverified guests to the holding lounge until we've completed a full authorization check." He nodded. "Of course." Maribel started to speak, then stopped. Her mouth opened as if to argue, but the weight of the moment pinned her in place. Iris, still frozen behind her sunglasses, looked around like she expected someone else to step in, to correct this, to fix it. But there was no one. Just the two of them, and the realization that the rules weren't bending today. A bellhop approached, suitcase in hand, looking between the front desk and me. "Where should I take their luggage?" I didn't hesitate. "Nowhere. Not yet." And then I stepped aside, quietly, gracefully, letting the silence take over, letting it say everything I didn't need to. The doors sealed behind me with a soft hiss, the kind of quiet finality that felt more permanent than it should have. I didn't turn around. There was no need. I already knew what I'd see. Pitying looks, subtle glances, the kind people throw at a person they've already written off. I walked the stone path back to my villa, the ground lighting up with each step, as though the earth itself acknowledged me. A silent kind of recognition. I wish I could say the same for my family. But the Gellhorns never saw me unless I was useful or inconvenient. Tonight, I was both. Inside, I kicked off my shoes, poured a glass of water, and sat in the stillness. The silence after conflict has a sharpness to it. It's not peace, it's a clean cut. A sterile operating table where the mind performs its most brutal work, replaying words, rehearsing what should have been said, and sometimes realizing the worst part isn't what was said, but what was meant. My phone buzzed, once, then 3 times more. Savina. Her name was enough to jolt me upright. The first message was one word. Brace. The second, an image, a screenshot, and then another. My stomach tightened. I tapped the photo to expand it. It was a group chat. Core Gellhorns. The name itself was enough. They hadn't even tried to hide it. The chat included Mom, Uncle Arlo, Aunt Nessa, Maribel, all of them. I scrolled. Maribel. She's just being performative. We all know she spirals when she feels left out. Uncle Arlo. Let her have her little show. Girls needed therapy since she was 16. Mom. We've tried to include her. She pulls away and then plays victim. Savina's next message hit harder than the screenshots. Did you know this existed? No, I didn't. But was I surprised? Not really, just hurt and tired. The last screenshot was fresh, minutes old. Maribel. She can't earn affection, so she buys control. It's pathetic. That one stayed on the screen for a while. I didn't respond. I didn't throw my phone or scream or cry. I just stared. Until the screen dimmed and went dark. There were old wounds I thought I'd already stitched closed. But this tore through scar tissue and hit fresh nerve. I stood up, walked to the bathroom, and turned on the shower. The water was hot, too hot, but I let it burn. I wanted to feel something that wasn't betrayal. I dressed with care, dark slacks, a sleeveless black top, hair tied back cleanly, simple, sharp, not mourning, not apologizing, ready. They were hosting a welcome dinner at the terrace bar. I hadn't approved it, but I hadn't stopped it either. The staff had orders to accommodate the Gellhorns. I hadn't corrected that. Maybe I should have. I made my way there through the dusk, the kind of light that softens outlines and makes faces seem kinder than they are. A kind of trick, that light. A lie. Their laughter floated on the wind, easy, effortless, unburdened. The kind that always came when I wasn't around. I approached without warning. No announcement, just presence. The laughter faltered, just a bit, but didn't stop. Maribel saw me first. Of course she did. Her smile was already sharpened when she raised her glass. "Well, the woman of the hour," she said, voice sugary sweet. "We were just toasting to our good fortune." I gave her a polite nod, took the empty chair across from her. "I hope everything's to your liking," I said evenly. She dabbed at her mouth with a napkin, performative and poised. "Oh, you know us," she said. "We're good at adjusting." There it was. The dig was coming. Some people think money can fix absence, she said airily, but loud enough for the others to hear. I met her gaze, steady. And some people mistake silence for surrender. I don't anymore. I stood. No need to stay and watch the aftermath. Let them sit with that. By the time I returned to the villa, night had fully arrived. The air smelled of salt and eucalyptus, clean and sharp, but my mind was tangled. Not angry, not even shocked. Just clear. I opened my laptop, pulled up the images from Savina's messages, printed each one on crisp white paper. Maribel's voice echoed in my head. She buys control. Fine. I stacked the pages, clipped them with a matte black binder clip. On top, I wrote a note. Simple, legible, no flourish. You said I wasn't part of this family, don't worry. I believed you, and I built something better. No threats, no explanations. I walked the short path to Maribel's room, slipped the packet under her door. No knock, no warning. Let her find it when she was alone. Let her read it when the spotlight faded. That was how they communicated. Quiet power moves, unseen strikes. This was mine. When I went to bed, I didn't sleep because it was resolved. I slept because I had answered. On my terms. In their language. And that was a beginning. Morning came cloaked in silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that hums with something unfinished. I dressed simply. Dark slacks, soft blouse, hair pulled back in a loose twist. I didn't need power heels or lipstick armor. The paperwork would speak louder than I ever could. Savina met me at the side entrance of the resort, her briefcase already unlatched, papers fanned neatly in one hand. She wore her courtroom face, stoic, clean, surgical. I nodded once and she mirrored it. No pep talks, no warming up. This wasn't a performance, it was a reckoning. We walked together to the private conference room. The staff had done as instructed, neutral setting, water glasses placed, blinds drawn halfway to temper the sharpness of morning sun. A rectangular table bisected the room, 8 chairs, 5 already occupied. My mother sat at the head of the table, as if daring me to say otherwise. Maribel was next to her, scrolling her phone, like this was beneath her time. My uncle Arlo and cousin Brent sat farther down, posturing in their button-downs as if presence equaled authority. I stepped in without hesitation. Savina followed. She closed the folder, set it on the table in front of me, and stood off to the side. She didn't sit. Neither did I. Thank you for coming, I began, voice steady. This won't take long. Maribel looked up with her best version of indifference. We have reservations to adjust. Can we skip whatever this is? Savina lifted one brow. I opened the folder and slid the first document across the table. This, I said, is the original deed of ownership for Ocean Crest Holdings, signed, notarized, and filed under my LLC 5 years ago. Maribel smirked. You've made that clear. I tapped the second document. But what you ignored was the clause added through the living trust of our grandmother. Clause 6B, revocation of all implied access to any family member defaulting on agreed tax responsibilities. Savina flipped to the page. Highlighted, bold, circled. I turned to Iris. You stopped contributing to the family holding 3 years ago. Maribel diverted the shared account for personal expenses, also documented here. That breach nullifies any beneficiary status tied to the original agreement. Brent made a sound like a cough but didn't speak. Arlo crossed his arms, bracing for a fight he hadn't prepared for. I own this resort outright, I said. Not symbolically, legally. You are not guests here. You are occupants under false pretense. That ends now. My mother blinked, once, then said, You wouldn't do this to your own blood. I met her gaze. You already did. I just read the paperwork. Savina stepped forward, formal now. Per our filing with the county clerk and pending court confirmation, the family members listed here, she held up a second packet, will receive a notice of vacated access. It's enforceable as of 9 a.m. today. Maribel shot to her feet. Are you serious? I didn't flinch. Deadly. You're punishing us because we left you out of a trip? No, I said. I'm protecting what I built. You just made it easier to draw the line. I took a slow breath and pulled a small stack of sealed envelopes from my leather tote. 1 envelope each, I continued, placing them on the table. Exit instructions, a personal effects inventory form, and for convenience, a transportation voucher for your departure. Arlo muttered. Unbelievable. I looked him dead in the eye. No, what's unbelievable is that it took me this long. Iris's voice trembled. This isn't how family behaves. I nodded once. Agreed. Then I turned to the staff member standing near the door. Please begin guest exit support. The assistant moved swiftly, stepping into the hall to notify logistics. From the window, I saw 2 bellhops standing by with discreet carts. No public show, no shouting, just movement. Maribel's phone buzzed. She stared at it, ignored it. I leaned forward just enough to be clear, not threatening. This wasn't revenge, I said. This was repair. I used to beg for a place in this family. Now I understand. I was never supposed to fit. I was meant to outgrow it. My mother opened her mouth again, but no words came. Just the click of her earrings as she turned her head away. I walked to the door. Just before I stepped out, I turned back and added, The locks changed tonight. I hope you find somewhere that wants you for who you are, not who you pretend to be. Not one of them responded. And I didn't wait. I walked out. Not angry, not smug, just free. The morning after they left, I walked the path from my villa to the porch overlooking the bluffs. The air had a sweetness to it, carried in by the salt breeze and warmed by late summer sun. It was the first time in days I hadn't dressed for a confrontation. No linen suits, no structured stance. Just a soft sweater, bare feet on old wood. The porch hadn't changed. The same white railing, the same wooden swing that creaked faintly when the wind nudged it. What had changed was me. Or maybe not changed, just clarified. I sat with a cup of Earl Grey, wrapped both hands around it like it might anchor me. From this porch, I used to watch my family gather around brunch tables, laughing too loudly, clinking glasses, performing togetherness like it was a show they knew by heart. I used to wait for someone, anyone, to wave me over. They never did. Now the chairs were empty, the tables stacked, and for the first time it didn't feel lonely. It felt clean. I looked down at the mug in my hands and smiled, softly, without bitterness. This wasn't triumph. This was peace, a different kind of ending than I used to imagine. It had been a week since the meeting in the conference room, a week since I handed over their exit instructions and watched the Gellhorns shuffle out like children who'd just learned the rules weren't theirs to make. They hadn't fought. They hadn't cried. They just looked stunned. Not because of what I did, but because I'd done it at all. Maribel had left the next morning. Iris and Uncle Arlo stayed an extra night, probably hoping I'd come find them, offer a truce or a hug. I didn't. They packed, they left, no knock on my door, no apology, not even a note, and I was okay with that. That morning on the porch, I reached for something I hadn't touched in decades. The old seashell jewelry box that used to sit on my childhood dresser. It had made the journey here with me, tucked in a box labeled sentimental and forgotten at the back of a closet. I found it the night before while reorganizing the guest villa for incoming clients. It still smelled faintly of lavender, still clicked shut in that oddly satisfying way. I opened it. Inside was a folded square of paper, yellowed at the creases. I unfolded it gently. My grandmother's handwriting greeted me, soft, curved script, like something from another time. You don't have to win the argument, just own the peace. I don't know how I'd never read it before, or maybe I had, and I hadn't been ready to hear it. But that morning, as gulls circled and waves reached for the shore, I got it. This wasn't about vindication. It was about restoration. I placed the note beneath a glass paperweight, shaped like a wave, then set both on the windowsill where the sun would hit them around noon. It wasn't for anyone else to read, just me. A reminder that even if the world refused to recognize your value, that didn't mean you weren't valuable. Later that afternoon, I received word from my assistant that the last of the Gellhorns had vacated the guest registry. Their forwarding information was filed. The keycards returned. They were gone. No legal noise, no online tantrums, just absence. Maribel had posted a vague quote on her social feed. Some people think silence is classy. It's actually cowardice in pearls. I didn't respond, didn't screenshot, didn't care. That night, as the sun stretched its last light across the ocean, Savina showed up unannounced. She carried a picnic basket. Still allergic to small talk? She asked. Only when it's dishonest. She laughed and set the basket down on the porch table. We sat and unpacked olives, goat cheese, strawberries, and wine. What now? She asked me after a while. I tilted my head. I keep building, I said, just not for them anymore. We talked until stars came out. Not about the family, not even about what had happened, just life, her work, a trip we might take together, the idea of opening a second ocean crest. When she left, I stayed a while longer, barefoot against the wood, toes tapping in rhythm with the tide. There was no sadness in me, no anger left to drain, just a strange, unexpected warmth. Because sometimes the most powerful closure isn't a slam or a scream. It's a door closing gently behind you, without need for a lock. And in that stillness, I didn't feel empty, I felt whole. Before we wrap up, let me share this with you. From one human being to another, from someone who's walked through silence and came out standing. If I've learned anything from this experience, it's this. Sometimes, the people who are supposed to love you the most will be the ones who misunderstand you the deepest. And that hurts. But healing doesn't come from forcing your way back into places you were never meant to belong. It comes from building your own place, standing your ground, and choosing peace over permission. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. You don't need revenge to feel restored. And you don't need their validation to live a life you're proud of. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes, family is who shows up when no one else does, especially when it's you showing up for yourself. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from something that was supposed to feel like home, but never did? What does family mean to you? Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. If this story touched your heart, comment a 1, so I know it resonated. And hey, if you didn't like the video, I'd love to know why. Was it the story? The ending? Let's talk about it down in the comments. And if this kind of story speaks to you, if you believe in truth, resilience, and second chances, then do me one favor. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next story. This is just one chapter in a whole world of stories we're building here together. Thank you for listening, and more importantly, for feeling it with me.